Welcome back and welcome to part 2 of this Blender tutorial series where we're creating this low poly stylized forest river scene. If you haven't seen the previous parts, you can check out the tutorial playlist with the link in the description. So in this part we're going to be modeling the low poly cabin, also the lantern, the dock, and the boat, and then we'll also do the materials and do the lighting. We'll also be adding in a sky HDRI. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the finished tutorial project files, you can get those with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the Blender Market. Now, one more thing before we start, I want to let you know about a really great Blender add-on for getting realistic skies and sky lighting. Physical Starlight and Atmosphere is an amazing Blender add-on for creating realistic skies and sky lighting. I've used the add-on myself and I highly recommend it. You can customize the sun, atmosphere, stars, clouds, fog, and more. The add-on also provides some outstanding sky presets, such as daytime and sunset, fog and haze, Mars, and even retrowave. You can also change the time of day just by rotating the sunlight. Check out the add-on with the link in the description, and by purchasing the add-on through my link, you'll be helping to support this channel. So let's model the low poly cabin now. So let's just first make sure the 3D cursor is in the center of the scene, and I'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a cylinder. And right behind me on the add cylinder settings, I'm going to make sure it's set to 8 vertices so it has the low poly style. Then I'm going to scale it down by 0.2 and I'll press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Let's go into edit mode and I'm going to rotate it. We'll rotate it on the Y axis by 90 degrees and I'll just move it back here. And then I want to add a mirror modifier, so we just need to model one side. So I'll go here to the modifiers, and on the modifiers, let's add a mirror modifier. Now what I can actually do is just model one corner of the cabin and then we can mirror it on the x-axis and the y-axis. So I'm going to pull it out here and then we can mirror it over on the x and y, so I can just model one corner of the building or the cabin and then it will mirror to the other side. So we're going to scale this out and we'll scale it farther like that. And then I want to select the face, so go to the face select, we're going to select this face and we're just going to delete the faces. And then if I select everything, let's turn on the clipping button and then I can drag it here into the mirror and then pull it back, so now it's merged, and maybe bring it back a bit. And we are going to be adding a door on the front of the cabin, but we're going to do that later after we apply the mirror modifier because I don't want the door on the back of the cabin. So I'll bring it out a bit farther and make it just a little bit longer. This is just going to be one of the logs of the cabin. So real quick, I'm going to turn off the clipping and then we're going to duplicate it and move it out. And then I can turn back on the clipping. Then I can rotate this on the z-axis by 90 degrees like that. And then we can just drag this in here and just stick it into the mirror. So that's the other side of the walls. And I think I want to select everything and bring it out just a little bit more because by how big the logs are, I do think the entire cabin should be a little bit bigger. So just bring that back a bit. So now I'm going to deselect everything, hit the L key just to select that piece there, and I'm going to bring it back just like this so the logs don't overlap, and bring it in a little bit. So now just going to add one side. So I'll deselect everything, hit the L key to select this piece, and I'll go to front view, and I'll duplicate it and move it up just like that. And then I'll duplicate it again, move it up just like that. And I'm just going to continue to do that, so duplicate it and move it up until we have about 7 of them. And I'll just do 2 more. So I'm just going to do 7 of them. So bring it up just like that, and that's going to be the front of the house. So now I'm going to deselect everything. I'm just going to select this piece here by hitting the L key, and I'll duplicate it and move it up here. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm just going to duplicate it and move it up. Now what you can do, if you hit Shift D to duplicate, and then hit Z and bring it up on the Z axis and then click there to place that. If you do that all in one action, then you can press Shift R, and Shift R is going to repeat the last action, so it's going to duplicate it and move it up. So now we have the walls of the cabin. Now I want to have them kind of like woven together so they look like a log cabin where some of the logs are sitting on top of the other logs. So what I'm going to do is just Shift select some of these faces like that. So I'm going to select every other face and I'm going to just pull it back. Then I'm going to select these faces right in here, and I'm going to pull them forward. So now we get kind of that cool look of the log cabin where the logs are kind of going through each other and laying on each other. So we have some shorter ones and some bigger ones. Now on the very top here, I will go back into edit mode, just select this one and duplicate it. But then this one I'm going to pull back a little bit just like that. And then I'll just duplicate one more. So hit the L key to select the entire log and duplicate it and move it up. So we're actually going to have 8 of them. But this one on the top here, we're going to start to have it kind of going going back in so that we can have a slanted roof. So let's hit the L key to select both of these objects, and we'll duplicate them and move them up again. And then I'll hit the P key and we're going to separate by selection. So now this roof is going to be its own object, so we'll just move the roof down. But then we'll go into edit mode, we're going to select everything, and we're going to move everything back here on the x-axis just like that, and that's going to be the beginning of the roof. So we'll go to front view, we're going to duplicate it and move it up, and then we're going to bring it back a little bit like that, duplicate it again, bring it up, and then bring it back here on the x-axis. And we're just going to continue to do that until it meets at the very top. So just duplicating this and just moving it over like that. One more time, duplicate it and move it over just like that. And then here at the very top, we'll just hit the L key to select that piece, and we'll duplicate it and move it up here. And we're just going to stick these really close to each other. You can also rotate it and then kind of stick it right in there so they're pretty close. And then for the last one on the very top, we're just going to have one more log. So I'll duplicate this, move it up, and I just want to rotate it back over kind of like this. And let's go to the vertex select. We're going to go into wireframe and we're going to deselect everything and then just box select just this part here on the end. And we're going to delete the vertices. Then I'll hit the L key to select just that log, just the half of the log, and I'll bring it here into the mirror and then kind of pull it back and just bring it down like that. So if I go back to solid view, we just have one log on the top. And if I just hold down the Alt key and select that entire loop there, I'll hit the F key to fill the face. So now that we've made the entire cabin, I want to select the bottom object here and I want to cut out a door. So to cut out a door, we want to apply the mirror modifier. So we'll just click on the drop down and apply that. So now I go into edit mode and I'm just going to hold down the Alt key and the Shift key and just select all of these loops here. And I'm going to select 7 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how tall the door is going to be, and I'll hit Control B to add a bevel and just make this be the size of the door, and then just hit X and we're just going to delete the faces. So now what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift and Alt key and we're going to select all of these loops right here, and then do that on the same on the other side. So hold down the Shift and Alt key and we're just going to select all of those loops right there going down, and we'll hit the F key and that's going to fill all the faces. So now we have a door there on the front of the cabin. So now in object mode, we'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a new cube, and we're going to move the cube forward and just stick it up here. And if we go into edit mode, we can scale it down on the X and also the Y and just kind of make it kind of a thin door, and then just kind of bring it forward like that. All right, and then we can scale it up just to fit the size of the door and kind of bring it down. So just something like that. So that's going to be the size of the door, but I want to make 4 different boards, kind of wooden boards. So I'm going to go to wireframe and I'm just going to box select this side, and we'll go back to solid view. And I'll just bring the faces back here. And then if I select everything, I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, bring it over on the X-axis like that. And then because I did that in one action, I can just hit Shift R and Shift R to repeat the last action. And then if you select everything, you can kind of scale it, kind of scale the size of it like that, kind of bring it down. And I think it's a little bit too high on the Z-axis, so maybe bring that down. And then with everything selected, I'll hit Control B to add a bevel. Just add a small bevel because that kind of looks cool, kind of gives it a cool stylized look. There's just a tiny little bevel there. Now something I noticed is there's a little bit too big of a gap there in the door. So back in edit mode, if I select everything, I can change the transform pivot point to individual origins, and then I can scale this on the X-axis. And I can scale out each individual one to kind of fill those little holes there in the boards. And then I'll change the transform pivot point back to median point. So now what I want to do is kind of make some metal pieces here, which are going to connect the door, and then also make kind of like a hinge. So I'll go to the add menu, let's add another cube, then I'll bring the cube forward. Let's go to front view and I'll bring the cube up. And if I go into edit mode, I can scale the cube down and bring it up here and scale it up so it's really thin. So now that the origin point is right down here, I can add modifier and I can add a mirror modifier. And instead of mirroring on the X, we're going to mirror it on the Z. So now it's going up and down, and I can just bring this down here. And so this is going to be kind of those metal pieces, which are kind of making the door stronger. So I'm going to scale it down. Let's also make it a bit more thin like that. Scale it down and just stick it here going into the door a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit longer and then scale it on the X-axis. So now I'm going to add some loop cut. So I'll hit Control R for a loop cut, drag this over here, hit Control R for another loop cut. We'll scale the loop cut up on the Z-axis, add another loop cut here, and then this one kind of scale down. We'll add another loop cut here and kind of scale this one up a little bit, and maybe add another one like that, and then also select the entire thing and scale it out a little bit, just kind of making the basic shape. All right, just like that. And then I want to have kind of like a sharp kind of arrow piece right here on the front. So if I go into wireframe, we'll box select the front and move it back. and I can extrude it. We'll scale it on the Z, and then extrude it and scale it on the Z again, and extrude again and scale it way down. And maybe select that entire loop and scale it down. Maybe in wireframe, we'll select the entire thing and scale it out a little bit. Maybe scale this part down a little bit. And I think everything could be a little bit more thin, so maybe I'll scale everything down the Z-axis. Now I want to make this look a bit more three-dimensional, so if I go into edit mode, I'm going to add a horizontal loop cut right there in the center, and then I can just bring the horizontal loop cut out like that, so it's kind of popping out, so it looks more three-dimensional. So now I want to model kind of like a basic hinge or handle. So what I'm going to do is place the 3D cursor right here, and I'll go to the add menu and add a cube. Then if I go into edit mode, I'm just going to scale the cube way down, just like that. Let's maybe scale it out so it's a bit longer, and then I'll hit Control B for a bevel, and just make a bevel right there on the cube. Let's now go to the add menu, and I'm going to make kind of like a handle, so we're going to add a torus, and then right after I add the torus, let's click here on the torus settings, and I can make this kind of low poly, make it look stylized by turning down the minor and major segments. So maybe I'll turn the minor segments to like a 6. Let's go into wireframe, and the major segments, maybe just turning it to like a 10 is pretty good. So I'll scale it way down. I can rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. Let's bring this down here, scale it down a little bit. Let's scale the entire thing up a little bit like this. Maybe just box select the bottom and bring that down a little bit like that to kind of make a basic knocker or handle. And that looks pretty good just kind of looking at it from far away. So there we go, we have a basic door handle. Let's save our project again. So now let's make the cabin roof. So we'll go up here to the roof. I'm going to center the 3D cursor, and I'll go to the add menu and add another cube. Let's bring the cube up, and then I can go into edit mode and bring it over to one side, and I can scale it down and scale it down on the Z axis and scale that up there like that. So we're just modeling one of those shingles on the top of the roof. Let's go to front view, and I can scale it down, kind of rotate it, and we're just going to stick it here right there on top of the log. And then let's bring this all the way over here, kind of bring it over to the end. And then just to give it a little bit more faces, I'll hit Control B and just add a very small bevel, kind of like that. So now if I select everything, I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, bring it over on the Y-axis like that and place it there. And then I can hit Shift R and just repeat the last action and bring it over to the other side. Now you can see it's maybe a little bit too long or a little bit too short, but if I just select everything, I can scale it in and just bring it in there because we don't really need an exact size for the shingles. So I can just kind of adjust the size slightly by scaling all of them. So they all have the same size. All right, like that. Let's go to front view, and I'm going to select everything. I'm going to rotate this and bring it up, rotate it like that. And I want to rotate it so there's a little bit of extra space here. And now I'm going to duplicate it and bring it down and kind of have it overlapping. Now, before I continue to duplicate all the shingles, I want to offset them so they look more random. So if I go up here to the front, I can bring this over like that. Just offset it a bit. And then I just want to go into wireframe, just box select the endpoint here, and I can bring it back in. And then if I hit L to select that piece, I'm going to duplicate it and bring it all the way over here to the other side. And then we can kind of scale it up a little bit and stick it there. So we just have some smaller ones. So I'll now go to front view, and I'll select everything in edit mode, and I can duplicate both of them, bring them down here, and you can see that it's going to be offset. So I'll duplicate this again with Shift D, drop it here, kind of rotate it a bit, duplicate again, stick it here, and then I think just one more time we'll do that. So just stick it right there. And then also right here, there's a little bit of extra space. So I might need to box select some of these and kind of rotate them and move them down. Maybe box select this piece, and I'm box selecting it in wireframe so I can select the entire row, because if I do it in solid view, it's just going to box select the front. So I'm going to go into wireframe, box select the entire thing so we have the entire row selected, and kind of bring that down. All right, just like that. And there we go, we have a cool stylized roof. Now if I select the roof in object mode, I'm going to search for a mirror modifier here on the modifier properties, and we're just going to mirror it over on the x-axis. So now the roof is there on the other side. So now I'm going to model a basic chimney here on the back. So I'll go to the add menu, and let's add a cylinder, and just make sure that the vertices is set to 8 so it looks low poly. And let's bring it up here. And we'll go into edit mode and just scale it down. And let's go to front view, and I'm going to go to wireframe, just kind of scale that down. If we go into object mode, I'm just going to bring it back here and then go back into edit mode. So I'm going to rotate it, scale it down and rotate it and stick it here inside the house. And then if I just box select the front, we're going to bring it up and bring it out. And then I can extrude it and rotate it and move it over, extrude it, rotate it and move it over. And then we can also scale it on the z-axis by 0 and hit enter so it's flat. And then I can extrude the entire thing up just like that. So if we get a solid view, you can see we have a basic chimney. Let's zoom into the chimney by hitting the period on the numpad, and I'm going to inset the top of the chimney, and then I'm going to extrude the chimney up, and then I'm going to extrude it, but then I'm going to scale it, and we'll make this a lot bigger like that. And then I can extrude up again, and then what we're going to do is scale it by 0 and hit enter. So we have kind of that stylized chimney where it's kind of pointy, so the smoke can kind of come around here, but I believe they have these here on some chimneys to keep the rain out of it. And then we need to merge the vertices because right now there's a lot of vertices on top of each other. So select everything, and we're going to hit M, and we're going to merge by distance. And I suppose just to make this slightly more realistic, you can go to the face select, you can hold down the Alt key and select those faces, and then inset the faces, and then extrude them down, just to make that a little bit more realistic. However, you're probably not really going to be able to see in there in the final render. Let's zoom out, and there we go, there's the chimney. Now the chimney is pretty small, and especially because this is stylized, I want everything to look a bit bigger, so all the elements should be a bit bigger. So we're definitely going to make this chimney a bit bigger, just kind of stick it right in there. All right, that's good. And then another small detail, which you probably won't be able to see, but I'm going to add it anyways, is I'm going to delete one of these tiles. So if I select the roof, I'm going to click on the drop down and apply the modifiers. So the mirror modifier is applied. And now if I go into edit mode, I can hit the L key just to select that tile, and I can just delete the vertices. So now I can just hit the L key to select this entire piece and kind of scale it down, kind of bring it over so it's a bit smaller, and then I can duplicate it and just stick another one right there that's smaller. If I go back to object mode, I can move the chimney over like that. And then if I select this piece, we'll go back into edit mode. I can just deselect everything. Let's go into wireframe. And it's a little bit hard to see, so maybe I'll go here inside the chimney, and let's hit the L key to select that entire piece. And I want to move this entire piece down. So let's go to the vertex select. I'll hit the B for the box select and click and drag with my middle mouse wheel to deselect the bottom. And then let me just go back to solid view. I can kind of bring this over, just kind of move it down and over, just so that we have a basic hole there for the chimney to come out of. And maybe I'll select this one here and kind of scale it and move it over, just so there's a bit more space. So now you can see there's just a little hole there for the chimney to come out of. So let's now model the lantern. So I'll go to the add menu, and we're going to add a cube, and we're going to use this cube to kind of hold out the lantern. So we're going to bring the cube up here. Let's go into edit mode, and I'm going to scale it way down and then scale it out on the y-axis like that. This is just going to be kind of like a piece of wood coming out. And let's bring this up here kind of above the door, kind of here on the side above the door. And that's where the lantern is going to hang on. So now we'll go to the add menu, and we're going to add a cylinder for the lantern. Again, we're just going to make sure the vertices is set to 8. And I can bring this up here, and let's kind of scale it down. And because I scaled this down in object mode, I want to hit Control A and just apply the scale. So that's the default size of the object. So we'll go to front view, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to go to wireframe, and I'm just going to box select the top and bring it up and scale it out a bit. And then if I select the bottom, we'll bring it down and scale it in a little bit. Let's maybe move the entire thing down, and in edit mode, I'm going to scale it down a bit. Let's go to solid view. So I'm now going to go to the face select and select the top face, and I can extrude it and then scale it, and then I can extrude it out even more, and then we will inset it. So hit I to inset, and we'll scale that down. And then we can extrude it again, and we can scale it again, and I'll extrude that again and scale it again. Then I'm going to hit I to inset and make it really small, and then we can just extrude up a small piece, which is kind of going to be like maybe a rope or something holding up the lantern, and we'll just stick it here inside that piece. Now I also want to have some little pieces of glass here, so if I go into edit mode, using the face select, I'm going to hold down the shift key and select all of these faces. So select all the faces on the outside. I'm now going to hit the I key to inset, but I want to hit the I key twice, and that's going to inset each individual face. And I'll just bring it down, place it there. And then what I can do is hit E to extrude, and then we're going to hit escape so it stays where it is. And then I'm going to hit Alt S. Alt S will scale the faces along the normals, and we're going to just move them in there and then place that there. So now we have just a basic low poly lantern. So that's going to be it for the cabin modeling. So let's now do the materials. So I'm just going to click over here to go to the shading workspace. I'm going to zoom out here, and I will hold down the Z button and go into the material preview. So I'm going to start by making a basic kind of stylized procedural wood material. So I'll just select one of the wood pieces, We'll click on new, and I can just call this wood. So to make this stylized wood, I'm basically going to add a noise texture. We're going to make it the colors of wood, and then we're going to stretch it using UVs, so it kind of gives it that cool kind of wood grain stretch texture. So let's search for a noise texture. Let's drop this here, and then let's enable the Node Wrangler add-on. So we'll click on Edit, go to the Preferences, and here on the Add-ons tab, you can just search for Node and just enable the Node Wrangler add-on. So I'll close the user preferences. So with the noise texture selected, I'll hit Control-T, and that's going to add the texture, coordinate, and mapping nodes. And I'm going to use the UV coordinates, so we'll put the UV into the vector, and so we'll be able to UV unwrap the texture, and then we can stretch the UVs to kind of stretch the noise. Let's take the noise texture factor, and I'll put that into the base color, and then we can actually see it showing up on the model. So I want to change a few of the settings, so I'll turn the scale to 7, and I'll turn the detail up to 3. I don't want to turn the detail too high because I want it to look like stylized wood, so I'll keep it kind of low, and I'll turn the roughness to like a 0.6. And then I will turn the distortion to a 0.5 because that can make it look a little bit more like wood. So now I want to create some custom colors here. So I'm going to search for a color ramp, and we'll put it between the noise and the principled shader. And I'll be creating a few different wood colors. So I'm going to drag the white tab over here, and then on the color here, I'm going to make it kind of like a light brown. Then I'm going to hold down the control key and click right here, and I'm going to click on this color, and if I hover my mouse over the value, I'll hit Control-C to copy. If I click on this tab, I can hit Control-V to paste it, so it has the same exact color. And then what I'm going to do is hold down the control key and click here to add another one. And this one I'm going to make just a little bit of a darker brown. And then this one here, let's make the black one also brown, and it's going to be pretty dark. So to make brown, just make it kind of a reddish or orangey color and then make it really dark. So something like that. And then what we're going to do is pretty much do the same exact thing on this side. So hold down the control key and click here and click here. And we're going to click on these colors. You can hit Control-C with your mouse hovered over the color, and then click on the other tab and hit Control-V to paste it. And we'll do the same thing for that color. So now you kind of see what we're getting, and I can kind of drag these around here like that to kind of change the contrast. So if they're really close to each other, it's going to be a lot more contrasty, or if I drag it farther apart, it's going to be less contrasty. Now there's a problem with this, and that is that it's mirroring over to the other side. So if we go to the modifiers, let's click on the drop down right here, and we're going to apply the mirror modifier. So the UVs still look the same because the UVs are mirrored, but we'll fix that later, but that way it won't be mirrored when we UV unwrap it. Now let's also change just a few more things. So this roughness, I'm going to turn to a 0.6, so it's a bit more rough. Now what I also want to do is add a simple ambient occlusion to the wood so that kind of these cracks and crevices look a bit darker. So to do this, I'm going to search for the ambient occlusion. Let's drop this here. And I will also want to go to the add menu and search for a mix color. And we're going to put the mix color here after the color ramp. Now the color ramp color is going to go into color B, and then the ambient occlusion, this is going to go into the factor. Now on the mix type here, we want to just set this to lighten. So choose lighten, and now here on color A, this is going to be the color of the ambient occlusion. So if I make it fully dark, you can now see kind of here in the cracks and crevices, it's going to be black. Here is the base wood, but then if I Control-Shift select the lighten, there it is with the ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to go back and forth so you can kind of see what this is looking like. So you can see right here, kind of in the cracks and crevices, the wood just looks a bit darker, so it just adds a bit more depth to the wood. So I'll Control-Shift select the principled shader. So let's now UV unwrap this. So if I go into edit mode and select everything, I will hit U, and we're going to unwrap, and we're going to choose the Smart UV Project, and then just click on unwrap. So now let's click over here to go to the UV editing workspace, and I'll go back into the material preview so I can see the texture. And if we go into edit mode, I want to select everything here in the UV editor, and I want to scale it up. So scale it up quite a bit bigger so I can actually see the wood. And then I need to scale it, and I'm going to scale it down. And I think I need to scale it on the y-axis. So if I scale the entire thing down on the y-axis, now you can see the wood looks nice and stretched. So I can scale it up bigger, and you can see now the texture of the wood looks really stretched there going along the wood. And so it adds kind of a basic stylized wood texture. And so we're going to be doing that for all of the other objects. So let's select this object here. We'll go to the modifiers. You can see we applied the mirror modifier, so that's good. So if we click right over here to go to the materials, we'll click on the drop down, and we're going to add the wood material, and then we'll go into edit mode. We're going to select everything. we're going to hit U and we're going to unwrap Smart UV Project and click on unwrap, and that's just going to kind of unwrap it all and make it flat. And then if we select everything, we're going to scale everything down on the y-axis and then scale everything way up so you can see the texture better. And there we go, so now you can see that they're being stretched, and you might need to rotate them. In my case, I don't need to do that, but if it's being stretched the wrong direction, you could scale it on the other axis, but for me, I need to scale it down on the y-axis so that the wood looks really stretched there. And on that side, that looks good as well. So now for the roof material, I want to use the same wood texture, but we're going to make it darker. So we'll select the roof. Let's click on the drop down and add the wood, but then we're going to click on this little file icon here to duplicate it so it is a separate material. And if I click here to rename it, we'll rename it to roof. So now let's UV unwrap it because you can see it's all using the same UVs, so it looks the same. So if we go into edit mode and select everything, we'll hit U, unwrap, Smart UV Project, and click on unwrap. And then let's scale this up so we can see the texture better. And then I need to scale it down. Yeah, scale it down on the y-axis so that it looks long and the wood texture is going down here along the roof tiles. Let's now click here to go to the shading workspace, and to make the entire thing darker, I can just search for a hue saturation value here in the shaders. We'll put this after the lighten, and then I can just take the value and turn it down. So maybe turn it down to like a 0.5 or maybe a 0.2, so it's a lot darker. And there we go, we have the top of our roof. So let's go back here to the layout. We're going to select the door. We'll go to the materials and we're going to add the wood material. Let's go into the material preview. And it looks like this is already UV unwrapped pretty well. But if we go here to the UV editing, let's zoom in here. I will just re-UV unwrap it because you can see the planks of wood are all using the same texture. So I'll hit U, unwrap, Smart UV Project, click on unwrap, and then we can scale it, and let's also scale it down on the y-axis again so that we have a nice stylized texture there. Let's also select this piece here, the log. We'll add the wood, and then again go into edit mode, and we're going to scale the entire thing down to kind of stretch it and scale it up. And also this face here, it doesn't really look stretched. So let me just scale it down. I need to scale it down more and maybe scale the whole thing down a little bit. That looks a little bit better. All right, so we'll go back here to the shading workspace and we just need to add a few more materials. So I'll select this piece here. We'll click on new and I can just call this like metal. And then to make it look like metal, I can turn the metallic value to 1. And I can also turn the roughness down a little bit to a 0.4 so it's a little bit more shiny. And then I'll just make this a very simple gray color and maybe actually turn that up a little bit. It's a little bit darker. So just like that. Let's now select this here. We'll click on the drop down and add the metal. And then also let's go right up here. We're going to select this piece here. So select the chimney, go to the drop down and add the metal. Now I do want to duplicate this material just to make it look like a more rough metal. So I'll click on this button here to duplicate it and let's call it chimney. And then I'm just going to turn the roughness up to maybe like a 0.7. And also maybe I'll turn the brightness up just a little bit. So it just looks a little bit different. Let's select the lantern and I'll zoom into it. And let's click on new. I can call it lantern. And for this, we're just going to make it a bit shiny. So maybe turn this to a 0.4 and I'll turn the base color to fully black. And then I also want to create a glass material. So if I go into edit mode, we already have those pieces selected, but you can select them if you need to. And we're going to go here to the materials and I want to create another material in the material slots. So we'll click on the plus here, we'll click on new, and I can just rename this to glass. Now for this, I'm going to search for the glass shader and I'll delete the principled, but then I'm also going to search for the transparent. And we're going to mix these two together to create a cool glass material. So let's search for a mix shader and we can plug this into the top one and the glass into the bottom one. And then this can go into the surface here of the material output. And then select the glass and click on the assign button. And now that is assigned there to the object. So let's go back here to the layout. I'll kind of zoom out here. We'll save the project again. And there is our stylized low poly cabin. Now, since we've been working with some of the materials, I do want to change the render engine. So I'm going to be doing this tutorial in Eevee. So here on the render engine, I will change this over to Eevee. However, you could use cycles as well. The final render looks pretty much the same in cycles and Eevee, but I'm going to be using Eevee because it's stylized and Eevee also renders quite a bit faster. And then also to make Eevee look a bit more realistic and just make it look nicer, let's checkmark the ray tracing. Now, one more final thing before I finish with this is I want to go to the add menu, and I'm going to go down here to empty, and I'm just going to add a sphere empty. And I'm adding a sphere empty because it won't show up in the final render because these empty objects don't have any visible faces. And I'm going to scale the sphere up and just stick it here and put it in the center of the entire cabin. Then if I just go into wireframe, select the entire cabin, and select the empty last, I'll just hit Control P, and I'm going to set parent to object, keep transform. So now if I move the empty, it'll all move around with it. So this will be really helpful when we are placing the cabin in the scene. So I'm going to box select all these objects, and I'll hit M to move, and we're just going to move them into a new collection, and I'm going to call this cabin, and click on create, and there we go, they're now in the cabin collection. Let's just hide these objects for now, and in the same collection I'm going to be adding the other objects, so the dock and the boat. So let's model the dock. So I'll go to the add menu, let's go to mesh, and I'm going to add a cube. Let's zoom into the cube, and I'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit on the X, and then we'll scale it down on the Z, and we'll scale it down on the Y, and we're just going to make one plank for the dock. So we're now going to duplicate it and move it over, and then because we did that all in one action, I can hit Shift R to repeat the last action, and we're going to make 8 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and maybe scale them down a little bit and bring them back. Actually move this into the center. Let's move it into the center there of the origin point. So now what I want to do is with each individual plank here, I want to make it kind of random and quirky to just make it look a little bit more like a dock, so kind of random bits of wood. So I'm going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, and we'll just drag this here. I can maybe scale this down. If I go to the face select, I can maybe scale this face up and scale this one up. We can do the same thing for this one, so maybe scale this side up, and maybe this side, scale it down. I can also add a loop cut here on the side, and if I go to the face select and select this face, and I can extrude it, maybe scale it down a little bit like that, so it looks like a piece of the wood is kind of coming out. You could also go to the edge select and select that edge and like add a bevel there just to make it look a bit more random. Let's also add a loop cut here, and then add another loop cut here, and I can maybe add a bevel to this loop cut, maybe scale it down a little bit. All right, so it looks a bit more random. Maybe add another loop cut here and scale it up a little bit. So this one is just a little bit more thin. Let's go right here and let's go to the edge select this edge, and we'll just add another bevel. And maybe we can select this edge here and kind of pull it out so it's a little bit longer. And I'm just going to continue to do this for all of them, or at least most of them. So maybe add another loop there, maybe select this loop and bring it out, add another loop there, and kind of bring this one in. So you can see now it's kind of looking a bit more quirky and random. Maybe even select some of these faces and bring some of these faces down, bring another face up, just to make it look more random. Maybe I'll add another vertical loop cut, and then if I go to the face select, we can extrude this face out, maybe scale it and bring it over like that. Maybe do the same thing on this side, so extrude it out, and maybe scale that down a little bit. So there we go, now the dock looks a lot more random. Now also in edit mode, let's go to the add menu, and I'm going to add another cylinder and make sure it's using 8 vertices. I want to scale it down, then scale it up a little bit like that. Let's go to top view, and I can move it over here. And then let's also scale it up a bit more and then bring the entire thing down. And we'll duplicate this, put one over here. We'll go to top view, and I'll duplicate this again, and we'll put another one here and another one here. And then we're also going to put one in the very center. So we'll duplicate this, we'll put this here. Now you can actually see, because I created 4 of them here and then 4 of them here, there actually isn't one in the center. So if I just go into wireframe, I'm just going to box select half of it and bring it out. Let's bring this part out, and then I can just select one of these and I'll duplicate it. Maybe I'll scale it on the x-axis by -1, so it's kind of flipped, just like that, something like that. And then if I just hit the L key to select that piece, let's bring it over here, and we'll duplicate it again, like that. So if I go back to solid view, now we have all those pieces there. I also need to select everything and hit Shift N to recalculate the normals because I flipped that object. Now right here at the very end of the dock, I want to select this piece and bring it up a little bit, and we're going to have a rope tied to this piece, and then the boat will be right here. And I'm also going to add a bevel just right there. Just hit Control B for a bevel. Now also here on the bottom, let's go into edit mode, and I want to add some planks here to kind of connect them. So we'll add a cube, we'll scale the cube way down, bring it over to one side, and then we can scale it up on the y-axis, and then also bring it in, maybe flatten it down a bit, and we're just going to have a plank here which is going to connect all the pieces, and maybe make it a bit longer, and then we will duplicate it and just add another one right over there. So that's going to be it for the dock. So let's now model the boat. So I'll go to the add menu, we're going to add a cube, and I'll bring the cube over here. And then if I go into edit mode, I want to flatten the cube down a little bit. And now let's go to the face select, and we'll just select the top face, or the front face. We'll go to top view, and we're going to have the boat sideways, so I'll extrude it out, start to scale it down, extrude out again, scale it down on the y-axis, and then just one more time, scale it down on the y-axis. That's going to be the front of the boat, and then on the back of the boat here, I'm going to extrude it, and we'll just scale it down a little bit more. So that's pretty much going to be it for the boat. Maybe I'll squish it down a little bit on the x-axis. So we're now going to select the bottom faces, so select all these bottom faces, and we'll extrude it down and scale it down. Just like that, maybe bring it over a little bit and bring it up. So that's going to be the bottom of the boat. Let's now inset the boat. So we're going to select all the top faces. We'll hit the I key to inset, and I want to hit the I key again so it insets them all together. Then I can go to front view, and we'll go to wireframe, and I can extrude it down, and then I can extrude it down and scale it down like that. Let's now model the paddles. So I'll add a new object. We're going to add a cube, and I'll bring the cube over here. Let's go into edit mode, and I'll just scale it way down. We'll go to top view, and I'm going to scale this out so it's quite a bit longer. And then we're going to add the paddle here and then the back of it over here. So let's scale it down on the z-axis so it's a bit more flat. And then we're going to select the back face. We'll go to top view, and we can extrude it, and we're going to scale it up on the y-axis. And then extrude up again. So extrude up and scale it on the y-axis. And then extrude up again, and we'll scale it down a bit. So that's going to be kind of the handle. Let's now go here to the front, and we'll select the front face, and we'll go to top view. And I can extrude it, and then scale it up a bit. And we'll extrude that again, scale it up a bit more, bring it out farther, extrude again, and then we'll extrude it and start to scale it down on the y-axis. All right, just like that. So we just have a basic wooden paddle. All right, let's scale the object down and apply the scale. And if we go to top view, we can maybe rotate this. We can have maybe two of them just kind of sitting here on the boat. You could also have them going into the water if you want to. And then I'll hit Shift D to duplicate. We'll rotate it. And let's also rotate it a little bit like this and just stick the paddles on top of each other. All right, and maybe rotate it on the Z axis. And we can maybe bring this out a bit. All right, let's save the project again. So now what I want to do is model a very basic rope, which is going to be connecting the boat to the dock. So let's go to the add menu, and we're going to go to curve and add the BZA curve. Let's bring the curve over here, and we can go to top view and rotate the curve. And then if we go into edit mode, we can select the handles and kind of rotate the handles. And let's extrude this handle, kind of scale that down. Let's box select these handles and bring them up a bit. And then we'll zoom in here, and we can kind of scale the handles, and then you can hit E to extrude. You can scale the handles and rotate them. And we're going to rotate the handles around this little piece here on the dock. So this is where it's going to be kind of tied onto. So we can extrude this and kind of rotate it, and extrude again and rotate it. We're going to make a simple kind of knot here, and then we can extrude it, rotate it. All right, and then extrude it down again. Then if we select this one on the other side, we can bring it down here, and this part here, maybe scale it down so it's a bit sharper. All right, bring that down like that, extrude it down and rotate it. And we're just gonna stick it right in there. And if you wanted to, you could like tie it to something on the boat, but it's not gonna be really visible in the final render down there. So I'm just gonna go with that. So now let's give it some thickness. So if we click right here to go to the object data properties, we're gonna go to geometry, and here on the depth, we're gonna turn up the bevel depth. So just turn that up kind of like that so that it's more thick. And then if you need to, you can go back into edit mode and kind of fix the knot. Now I also want to fill the ends right here, so we're going to click on fill caps. Now to make this kind of have the low poly style to it, I'm going to go back to object mode, and we're going to click on object. We're going to convert to a mesh. So if I go into edit mode, you can see it's a mesh now. Let's also shade it flat. And then just to kind of give this an even more low poly style, let's go to the modifiers, and we're going to search for the decimate. Add the decimate modifier, and we can just drag the decimate modifier ratio down, and I can see it has that kind of low poly style with the sharp faces, and many of the faces are triangulated. And then we can just hit the drop down and just click on apply to apply the modifier. Let's now add some basic materials to these objects. So if I click on the dock, we'll go to the shading workspace, and we will click on the drop down, and we're going to add the same wood material. And we'll add the same wood material to the boat, and we're also going to add the same wood material to the paddles. So now what I want to do is just UV unwrap everything. So let's go here to the UV editing workspace. We'll select the dock first, and we'll hit U, unwrap, and we're going to do the Smart UV project. Click on unwrap, and then we can scale the entire thing, and then let's squish it down here on the y-axis. That's looking good. Maybe scale the entire thing up a little bit. So we have that cool kind of stylized wood texture there. Let's select the boat. We'll select everything, hit U, and again do Smart UV Project. And then we can kind of squish it down, scale everything up, and kind of squish it down there so it looks nice and stretched. So something like that's pretty good. And then we can select both of these objects at once, select everything. We'll hit U, we'll do the Smart UV Project, and then we can squish everything down and scale everything up, just like that, so it looks kind of stretched. All right, let's now just do a basic material for the rope. So I'll select the rope, click on New. We're just gonna call this rope. And for the roughness, I'll turn it up to like a 0.9, so it's pretty rough. And for the base color, I'll just make this pretty dark and kind of make it a orangey, kind of brownish color, maybe a little bit more towards the red, maybe a little bit brighter, but just something like that. Let's go back to the layout here. And if I open up the drop down, let's select all these objects and make sure to hit M and move them into the cabin collection. And I can hit Alt H to unhide the cabin, and we can just select the cabin and kind of move it back here so it's not overlapping, and bring it over here to the side. All right, let's go into the material preview to see the final objects. So before we finish this part, I'm going to do some basic lighting. So right over here, we already changed the render engine over to Eevee. You could use cycles if you want to, but I'm going to be using Eevee, and also I'm going to be using the ray tracing. Let's go here to the world properties, and I'm going to be adding in the HDRI that I mentioned at part 1. So if you haven't downloaded the HDRI, you can download it with the link in the description. So I'm going to click on the yellow dot here next to color, and I'll choose environment texture, and then I'll click on the open button. And here is the HDRI. It's the industrial sunset 02, and I download the 8K HDR version, so we'll click on open image. And if you go into the rendered viewport mode, it might be a bit laggy or take a little while to load up because it is an 8K image. It's a little bit larger. That actually loaded up pretty fast, but sometimes with these larger images, they can take a while to load up. But I do want to add a larger quality image because we're going to actually be able to see it in the sky. So that's looking pretty nice, and we have a nice sunset. And also here on the strength, I'm going to turn this down to like a 0.3, so it's not quite as bright because I want it to look evening. And then also, while we're managing the colors, let's go here to the render properties, and we're going to scroll down here to the color management, and I'm going to set the view transform to AGX. And then the look here, I'm going to set this to a very high contrast. So this will make things look more contrasty and kind of pop out the colors. It does initially make things look a little bit darker, but it'll make things look a lot nicer in the final animation. Let's now just add a basic sunlight to make the evening light brighter. So if I go to the add menu, we can just add a light, and we're going to add a sunlight. Let's rotate the sunlight. We're going to make the sunlight about in the same direction as this light here in the HDRI. So you can double tap the R key to kind of rotate the light around and just point it where the light is pointing, maybe rotate it slightly more down. Now if we click over here to go to the object data properties, I'm going to set the color to kind of this orangey kind of bright color, and this is going to make it look like the evening sunlight. And then here on the strength, let's turn this up to a 10, so it's quite a bit brighter. And you can now see we get this really nice, like strong evening yellow light there. So let's hit Control S to save, and this will wrap it up for part 2 of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the tutorial series. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel to help me keep on creating these free tutorials, then a great way to do that is by joining my Patreon page. So if you join one of my memberships, then you'll be helping to support the channel each month, and you'll also get access to lots of Blender content like the finished tutorial project files for this tutorial. And I do appreciate all of your support. So when the next part is released, it's going to be right up there on the end screen, and link will be in the video description. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the final part, part 3.